welcome back to another episode of Eternally Obsessed, the podcast where I, your host, Frid, dives into all things Marvel, Star Wars, or whatever in the media I'm eternally obsessed with. Today, we're going to be doing our first sort of wrap-up episode of 2021. I know it's currently in 2022, but, it's never too late to discuss the projects we got. So this particular episode, we're actually going to be focusing specifically on the movies that we've seen from Phase 4 so far. So Black Widow, Shang-Chi, Eternals, and Spider-Man No Way Home. And to talk about these movies and their impact on essentially the fandom, the future for each of these movies, and our overall thoughts, I have joined with me a very special friend, Lauren.
Hi.
Lauren is also known as Little Miss Scarlet Witch on TikTok, where she essentially cosplays as Wanda. And I'm going to let Lauren explain a little bit more and just introduce yourself to the podcast.
Hi. I would describe myself as a Wanda Maximoff cosplayer and impersonator. Really, my content is just trying to cover all the costumes she's ever worn, which is a lot, and just making them and having fun pretending to be her on TikTok. And so that's me.
I remember reading on your Instagram stories, you actually kind of posted a little spiel of how you really got into it and your goal with exploring Wanda costumes. So I'm really interested to hear more about that, and because I've never really seen one specific, like a person cosplay one specific character and have their whole content revolve around them. So I'm kind of curious as to why you chose that approach rather than also, trying to cosplay multiple characters. I think that'd be really interesting.
Okay, so I don't know if you can tell from the video, but I am super into vintage fashion, and dressing vintage and learning about fashion history has been a really big hobby of mine and part of my life for the last couple years. And so when WandaVision came out, something just clicked, and it was just it feels like it was made for me. So, and I have a list. I'm not sure if this is the exact number now with the Multiverse of Madness trailer, but I'm pretty sure she has 47 total outfits in the MCU. She wears a lot of clothes. So, and they're all super different. So it's almost like with all of the different sitcom periods that WandaVision goes through, and then her time before that, time after that, it's almost like cosplaying a bunch of different characters because there are so many costumes and so many personas she takes on per each sitcom decade. And I just fell in love with this character and thought it would be super fun to pour my love for vintage and my knowledge of that into costuming and just turning that into a Marvel hobby. And it became this project that was super fun. And now I've just kind of fallen in love with the character. I learned that I could do a really good impression of her. And then when I started on TikTok, I kind of started with the goal that I wanted people to be confused. I wanted them to be is this Wanda? Because there's nowhere on that account where I say hi, my name is Lauren. I just go as Wanda on the app. So I just kind of wanted to banter with this illusion that I was this universe's Wanda variant, and people ran with it, and it's been really fun since. I'm not Wanda Maximoff, but I have fun pretending to be her. So that's pretty much it. But I love all things Marvel. I didn't start Marvel with Wanda, if that makes any sense. So I have so much love for pretty much everything that they've done. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I think if you're a big fan of Wanda or fashion, specifically vintage fashion in the MCU, definitely go check out Lauren. She portrays Wanda so well. It almost feels like I'm watching Wanda doing Westview again, except this time it's broadcasted on social media rather than television. So yeah, Lauren's really creative with her ideas in that. So I definitely recommend you go and check out Wanda on TikTok. So yeah. All right. So like I said, we're talking about the Phase 4 movies in this. So let's get into it. All right, everyone. So we're going to start off and we're going to go discuss each of these movies by their release order. So we'll be starting off with Black Widow. And Black Widow was, I believe, came out on July 9th of 2021. It was the first Marvel movie we got after Far From Home, it had been I want to say a year after we finally got our
Over
first
a
Marvel
year,
movie.
technically. Far From Home was July 3rd, I think,
Right.
2019. Yeah.
Yeah, over a year. And then we got Black Widow. So everyone was excited for this movie. And it came. I personally watched it on Disney Plus. How did you end up watching Black Widow?
We were lucky enough to have like a pretty good situation with COVID where I live. So we were lucky enough to have the theaters open. So I actually saw it in the theaters like a million times.
Oh, yay. That's
It was
amazing.
like the first movie like back in the theater, like in general. So it was like a really big deal.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I think for me, my parents were just like a little apprehensive still about going to theaters because I live in a pretty big city. So they were like, maybe not. So yeah, but they were really, my dad was generous enough to buy it on Disney Plus, and it was, I actually stayed up until midnight to watch it. And
Oh,
then,
fun.
yeah, it was great.
I
And then
love
I
it.
watched it again with my sister Friday afternoon. So I watched it twice in like the span of like 8 hours or something.
Mm-hmm.
That was great. Yeah. So yeah, let's just start off with Black Widow. And I think the first thing we can in it just kind of talk about is, our overall thoughts of the movie, what we liked, or actually let's start off kind of back. Let's start off with so Black Widow is a movie that's been anticipated by a lot of Marvel fans. It's been something that, a lot of fans have been waiting for, especially fans of Natasha. And I'm a pretty big fan of Natasha, and I'm sure you are as well. I'm sure we've had in
Yeah.
our discussions, you mentioned you are a pretty big fan of Black Widow. So I always start like with kind of discussing what Black Widow meant to us and hence what this movie kind of was also meant to us, because I also have like a little story to share about that. But why don't you go first?
Mm. So I know a lot of people say that it was too late, which I partially agree with because yes, Natasha should have gotten her story sooner. Obviously, like she's since the beginning, since Avengers 2012, she's been one of the most loved Avengers. And as a female character and as one of the only female characters in Marvel for a long time, or main female characters, she is so important to so many people and continues to be so, even though we have more female representation now than we did back when she was our leading lady constantly through everything. However, I am of the opinion that if they had made the movie earlier, it wouldn't have been the movie that we got today, which I think I really, really love this movie. And I just think that like watching the old documentaries from like when they were making phase 1 and 2 and just seeing the way that they like kind of treated Scarlet and the way that they were approaching the character like makes me shudder to think about how that movie would have turned out if they had tried to make it back then versus the rich cast and the female directing and the like overwhelmingly female production team. Like it's so perfect and so perfect for Natasha's story that while I wish we had had it sooner because of that representation, I don't feel like that they could have done that representation as well back then as opposed to in 2021.
Yeah. Yeah. I I think there's elements of what you said. The movie should have been released earlier. If it was released earlier, perhaps it wouldn't have been like as female driven, or if we got like a female, like if Natasha was the lead of her own movie, it wouldn't have been like the best way. I said, if we did get one earlier, it wouldn't have been as good. And it's still good that we got one, and it was like the female directing. You could see that in the way that the themes were presented, and it was done.
I think it could have been a really good phase 3 edition to have like because okay, Civil War was phase 2.
I want to say Civil War was phase 2, maybe
I
like
think it was
end
the
of
end of
phase
phase
2,
2. Yeah.
maybe beginning of phase 3, somewhere around there. I don't exactly remember.
Yeah. So I could have seen this movie being a good opening for phase 3.
Yes.
And then it would have been able to be more Natasha focused, like you're saying. But I just think, I mean, obviously that didn't happen. And so the fact that they put it in phase 4 meant that they had to keep it more open and less Natasha centric, like you said, because Phase 4 is very all about opening up the universe and exploring like where we can go next. So having characters like Yelena and Alexei and Melina, and having like an open concept that they can continue to toy with in the future, and establishing like that even though this was in the past and it's not in the current MCU, it's still touchable and we can still work with it, and it still connects to Phase 4. I think that was kind of the driving, but I agree, like it could have been a good Phase 3 movie maybe, and been more about Natasha, which is kind of the story that we deserved. And I wish we would have gotten like a trilogy maybe, that would have been amazing.
Like I would have loved like a trilogy, but like it's like you said, you know, it's really the fault of Disney and Marvel for not for making the Black Widow movie too late. And we know that the reason they did that is purely because of, you know, not imagining that you would need like a female-centric led project properly. So it is completely the fault of Disney and Marvel that we didn't get like the Natasha story that we deserved. So I wouldn't even like blame the directors, because I would say in terms of the story being told, like Black Widow's actually a really good story. It's just because it's a story that's tied to the MCU, it just feels out of place. And I think like that was an issue, like that's an issue both Black Widow and Eternals had. Might be because they were both stories tied to the MCU. They kind of felt out of place for either, you know, like when they were released, or just the overall premise of the plot, which is I kind of want to get into when we get to the Eternal section. But I just realized that's like a similarity kind of between the two, and that's why a lot of people have Black Widow and Eternals could be because lower on their ranking is because the movies just felt out of place. I don't know.
I think I like that out of place because they're like the highest on my ranking.
Yeah, for me, Black Widow is the lowest, and it's just because like it feels the most out of place, and it didn't give me the Natasha story I was hoping. But like in terms of like MCU movies just like done really well, I think like the Black Widow movie is really like it's a really good story for, especially like if you're a young girl and you know you want to see like a spy thriller with like two females in it, and it's just all about that. I think the Black Widow movie is like a really good movie to watch. And just my emotional attachment to Natasha. I tried rewatching Black Widow one time and I couldn't like watch it. I like started crying. I was like, no, we can't do this. Oh my
goodness. So. Wow. Yeah, I think, and we can talk more about this, Phase 4 has been really interesting, and this is another way that I think it connects to Eternals in balancing this like very opposite energy with a lot of their movies of this is a good Marvel movie, and then this is just a really good movie. And I think that Black Widow falls into that category. Like, obviously you need some Marvel context, and like it is very Marvel, and Natasha's a very Marvel-centric character, but the story in itself, like the way the cinematography was done, the aesthetics, like it was like nothing we'd ever seen before. I think it's still to this day like one of the most beautiful, like visually Marvel films that we have, just because it's so visual in a way that they'd never done before. Like it has the grittiness of like Captain America and the Winter Soldier, but in a more like I don't know how to describe it, the way that the reds were incorporated constantly, and just the opening credits, like it's very much a very cinematic, like good film. And I think Eternals kind of falls into the same category.
Yes.
So I think people have beef because it's like, this is not like a Marvel-y movie, but I think there's good to be found in both.
Yeah. And kind of going off of your opening scenes, it's very interesting you bring that up for Black Widow, because I feel like Eternals also had that similarity with the opening scene. I don't know.
Yeah.
It felt very grand. It felt like something that you wouldn't have expected to see in a Marvel film. And I know like the Black Widow one, the scene that we saw, like especially like as a female watching that scene, like it definitely hit like very close. But then watching Eternals and seeing like this huge spacecraft going on the sun, you see these monsters come out and you're like, wait, this is set in the past, and it had like the Star Wars kind of thing. Like they both had such completely different opening scenes you wouldn't really expect to see in a Marvel movie. And then and to see that, it's like that's how I kind of agree. Like they kind of fall in the bucket of it's not maybe not be the best Marvel movie, but maybe if you just look at it from like the standpoint of is it a good film, they would probably be more presented better because I also and actually I'm gonna completely not bring this up here. This is something we can talk about in Eternal. So, but yeah, that's kind of I think that's a really like valuable discussion we had about Black Widow and kind of our thoughts on it. Um, what do you think about the future of Black Widow? I know there was recently like reports of there was going to be like a Black Widow 2 centering Yelena and Kate. And there were some people who are like Black Widow's not like Black Widow's like Natasha Romanoff, it's not a mantle. You can't have a Black Widow movie with like Yelena being the Black Widow. But what are your thoughts on that? And I'm just curious because we're going to talk about the future of Black Widow.
Yeah. I disagree with that. I think almost every Marvel character title is a mantle. I mean, and that's been a lot of what we've seen in Phase 4 has been passing that mantle on to somebody else. Like, who is a better example of that than Sam Wilson? Yeah. Like, there's just it's just the future. Like, if Marvel wants to keep going, they can't just keep focusing their stories on the same 6 characters constantly.
Yes.
Obviously, I would love to see Natasha again. I don't think that we are going to. I just don't think it's realistic. Like, as much as I hate that she's dead, like, she is dead and she died in 2019 and it has been 2 years, which is crazy, but like, it's been a while. And so I think that Black Widow was a great like last love letter to that character. And I would love to see the mantle moving on with Yelena, because I mean, who doesn't love Yelena? She's universally adored. She's amazing. She's a really, really real written character.
Yes.
And just like superhuman, very relatable. And that's part of the reason that she's so great. And I think a whole movie centering around her, and Florence Pugh is such a good actress. I would love to see it. I don't know how much Kate has to do with like that Black Widow world. I don't know how that would work as well, but I've critiqued Marvel for things like this in the past and then they blow me away. So honestly, if that's where they're going, I'm just going to sit back and like let them do their thing and hope that it's great. And I think that it would be, because I just trust them at this point.
Yeah, no, I'm going to have to agree with what you said. I think especially with the OG6, I feel like a lot of the hero titles, maybe except for Iron Man, are more of like mantle type of titles rather than like tied to like a specific person. I feel like Iron Man's the only one I can argue for because there's just something about Iron Man that I don't think you can really like replicate in another person.
Totally.
And so I feel like that's tied to Tony Stark, but I feel like Black Widow, like in itself, there's a lot of Black Widows. Like even Draco in the film said that they're all called Black Widows. So why would like I really didn't understand the argument of like fans being mad at we're getting another Black Widow film with Yelena being the lead, because in Black Widow it was established that all of those girls are considered widows.
Yeah,
like they're all considered widows. So why would you not have a Black Widow? I do understand though that, because of the premise of like, again, the film being a little late and like Natasha not always being treated best in the MCU, that you do want to keep that Black Widow title with Natasha. Like I understand the perspective on that. It's just because of the way the character has been treated. I feel like if maybe the character had been treated better during her time in the MCU, most fans wouldn't have any problem. But I do think, like with Phase 4, they're making changes, they're making more improvements on how they tell stories. And Yelena so far, like you said, she's been an absolute pleasure to watch. When I first watched Black Widow, I didn't immediately fall in love with her with a lot of people did. I think for me, she kind of grew on me, but it like when the moment she came in Hawkeye, I was like, okay, yes. I loved her. Like I loved her so much. So I would love to see like a Yelena led project. I think Florence Pugh is like one of the best actresses we've seen in Marvel Phase 4 so far, just introduced to Marvel. Just her charm, her wit. So I'm definitely not against seeing more of Yelena, seeing Florence Pugh in the lead. I think, that's a movie worth watching. And like you mentioned, like Kate, I feel like it'd be better if they didn't include Kate almost, because I feel like Yelena can carry herself so well in a
Yeah.
lead role. Maybe like Kate King there to like help in a few fight scenes, but I would really just want like a Yelena centered story, because for me she was the standout in Black Widow, she was the standout in Hawkeye. I would just love more Yelena content.
Yeah, me too. And that could like we said, Black Widow hadn't left a lot open. We could see her going back and tying up more things with Alexei and Melina. I think they've been in talks to come back.
Yes.
And this was like news like from like back in July,
Yes.
August, but they said that they were going to come back. I would love to see them back.
Yes.
I loved their family dynamic. Like, it was really authentically written and really fun. The acting was great. So I would love to like just see her come back and explore all of that a little bit more. Maybe not as centric as it was in the first Black Widow movie, because that's kind of what it was about. But if we could get like touching more on that, and then I don't know how Yelena would connect to the big universe, but I would be excited to see what they came up with.
I think, and this is just me, but I think a Yelena, maybe in the Black Widow, if she connects somehow to Shang-Chi's sister Xialing, because they both are very like they both are kind of like the new leaders of like female-led organizations, which I think is super fucking cool. With Xialing, you know, she had opened up her own like a cat, like she kind of the Ten Rings organization, like she started towards the end credits in her Shang-Chi. She had like all like males and females she had both men and women. And then with like I'm mixing up names. With Yelena, towards the end of Black Widow, we saw there were all of those like widows there. I think if we got like a crossover between those two worlds, that would be really interesting. I don't know what the plot would be, but I think like if you're gonna have two sisters crossover of assassins who, you know, left their home and found a better life, and the two sisters were abandoned, I think that's like the perfect place to start, because those two have so many parallels in their stories.
Yeah. And I mean, like, this is leading into Shang-Chi a little bit, which is the next movie that we'll discuss, but I feel like it's a good halfway point for like slowly pulling Yelena into the more like mystical, magical realm that the MCU is going. Shang-Chi is very half and half, because it's also like very real, like this is a crime organization, this is like real stuff, but it's also like there's dragons and like a mystical realm, there's Talo and all of that. So I feel like that would be a good way, because Black Widow is completely realistic stuff, it's completely real world grounded, rooted. And Shang-Chi kind of has like one foot in the mystical world and one foot in the real grounded world. So it would be a good way to start to pull her into that more crazy multiversal realm that the MCU is going towards.
Yes. And speaking of that, I think this is the perfect way to transition into Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings. I'm really glad that you brought up the point of it being a half and half, because to me that was one of the biggest strengths of the movie. And probably I feel like that's one of the reasons why people really enjoyed it the most, is because you never, like, I know a lot of people said Shang-Chi, like the plot of it may have followed the overall Marvel formula, but it actually did take a different step in the direction, in the sense that it balanced the two worlds of magic and grounded. And I don't think we've really seen that in a Marvel project up until that point. The stories were either completely like grounded, or they were, you know, completely in space, with like Thor movies. And the Thor movies did toy a little bit with the idea of blending the two, but I don't think any Marvel project had done successfully with combining two different types of stories until we got Shang-Chi. And without like, that was sort of my initial thoughts on Shang-Chi. Just brought that up, so I wanted to follow up on that. But let's talk about Shang-Chi. Like, what were your sort of overall thoughts on the movie? I'd love to hear about that.
Origin story movies are not my favorite.
Right.
It's harder to get into them just because of the basis that you don't know the character yet.
Yeah.
So they don't have that going for them, where you're already attached to the character. Yeah. When you're already attached to the characters in something, you have a certain amount of like, I'll let it go if the movie's not that good, because I love the characters in it.
Yeah.
So it's tougher for a origin story to make its mark and really like stick the landing.
Right.
And I thought Shang-Chi did that so well. I was really, really surprised with how like well they did that, because I don't know. I don't love all of the Marvel origin stories. I don't like the first Thor movie. I mean, like I like them as a Marvel fan, but like just as like a like I don't know. I wouldn't
Yeah,
pick this to
no.
watch out of all of the Marvel movies. You know, Iron Man 1, even Cap 1, it's like these are slow and there's a lot to establish, and I think this movie blew everything else out of the water and just established that origin story trope as like, this is so well done, because immediately off the bat they attach us to the characters, which is what they needed to do in order for us to follow along with the rest of the movie and be invested, which they did so well. So I think this movie is a masterpiece. I think it's so good.
Yeah, no, I don't know how I feel about origin stories. I feel like for me, I I would definitely say like out of like the Captain America and the Iron Man rankings, like for me, Captain America is my least favorite origin story. I mean, not origin story. I don't want to say that. Captain America is my least favorite. The First Avenger is my least favorite movie in the whole Captain America trilogy. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, I don't really care about origin stories. Like they're there. I like watching them, but they're definitely not my favorite types of movies. And it's kind of similar to you, like because we were getting introduced to the character. I will say though, like Iron Man 1 is a pretty good origin story, but I think for me, Shang-Chi is probably the best origin story we've seen
Mm-hmm.
so far. I don't know if I necessarily count Eternals and Guardians as origin
No.
stories since they're a team of superheroes rather than just a single superhero. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't count them as origin stories. So if you take away those two, but if we're talking about like a single superhero's origin story, I do think that Shang-Chi's probably my favorite one I've seen so far. Iron Man's a close second. But yeah, I think this movie was able to hit the mark on making us care about the characters, the world building of it. It was a lot like larger than I'd imagined it to be. I didn't expect
Yeah.
it to go into the mystical realm. I think that was one of the bigger surprises while watching the movie, where I was like, wait, we're dealing with magic now? I
Yeah.
knew the 10 rings were there, but I didn't expect the 10 rings to tie into Taulo and just hold that whole magical thing. But I'm glad they did because, like you said, Phase 4 is about really opening up the universe,
Mm-hmm.
and introducing something like Taulo does exactly that. And I will say, my favorite character coming out of the movie was Xialing. As far as origin stories go, or like the movies you've seen so far, I realized that my favorite has never really been the main character, at least with Black Widow and Shang-Chi.
Mm-hmm.
But who was your like favorite character coming out of Shang-Chi?
Shang-Chi. I
Shang-Chi.
love him.
Yeah.
I went into it expecting him to become a comfort character, and he did. I don't know if it's just because like we had exposure to Simu Liu and his amazing Twitter account before or whatever, but
Yeah.
I loved him. I feel like he was so great. And I agree, I'm not always one to just go for the main character, but I really, really liked how he was portrayed, and the conflict that he was going through was so interestingly dealt with, and seemingly did such a good job of just balancing that with also being really funny and really, I don't know, I love him. But
Yeah.
I love everyone in the movie. So
Yeah. No, I agree. I think overall, like Shang-Chi as a character himself was very charismatic, and I'm curious to see how he ties into the MCU. I mean, Katie was there, and Katie, she's probably she was she was good. I didn't really have much to say. Like, not someone I particularly enjoyed, but not someone I particularly like hated, but she was
mm-hmm.
good. And yeah, like you said, he was a charismatic character. I do hope we get to see him more in the future. Which talking about, let's kind of talk about the one thing I did want to talk about is sort of the Asian representation. And um I'm also not East Asian, so I can't really speak on if it was done well or not. But I will say,
Mm-hmm.
as an Asian, like I did see some like things that they had specifically in family and family dynamics that I've seen in my own family, and I was like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like this makes sense.
Yeah,
But
that's really
culturally
cool.
not some. Yeah, I think it was the first Asian superhero movie we got, right? Or in all of Marvel was the first Asian
Well,
led
definitely
project.
with Marvel, yeah. I mean, unless you count Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I do, but most
Right,
people don't. It's not
right,
canon, but they did
right,
do a
right,
great
right.
job with that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was like the first movie that we got with the Asian superhero in the lead, which I think this movie was really good in terms of, representation and sort of one of the parts of Phase 4 that Kevin Feige wanted to focus on is diversity and representation, and the movie did really do well with that. I know a lot of like people were talking about how the movie was in Chinese and how that was good that they did that because they're sort of like reflects the world we live in. So yeah, and yeah, I like Shang-Chi. I like the Asian representation in it. I think it's really interesting to see a different culture.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add?
No, I agree. I mean, Marvel has been so confined to New York City for so long. It is
Yes.
great to see. I mean, even just the fact that in the beginning of the movie, he's based in San Francisco. I know we're
Yes.
both from California, so that's kind of like, and it's
Yeah.
Northern California too. So that's but California aside, that's not really the point. Like, just to see like more of the world, and we'll definitely get into that with Eternals, but just obviously like there is more out there than New York freaking city. So I think that was so cool, and just obviously, yeah, getting to see as many cultures represented in the MCU as possible, I hope, in the future. And this year has done pretty good with that so far. So
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I'm actually really glad you brought up the point about not being New York focused. I feel like that's definitely something that I'm also, I wouldn't say tired of necessarily, but maybe
it's
probably
classic, but it's
it's
getting
classic.
old. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be one of the reasons why I'm not like I wouldn't say I'm not the biggest fans, but it could be one of the reasons that grounded stories are my least favorite in the MCU, just because I'm
Mm,
a person who like I'm a sucker for massive world building. Like I love stories like set on like a
yeah.
massive scale and like cosmic and space MCU are like some of my favorite movies to watch. My top
Mm-hmm.
three are my top four movies are all have some element of cosmic space tied into them. So I'm a
Mm-hmm.
sucker for those movies. So when we saw like the world of Talo, I was like, oh yeah, this is my jam. I'm so glad that
I
they're like really
know.
opening up the world with that. Like, and
Yeah.
to me, when I think of Shang-Chi, I always think back to the opening, not opening, but that scene where they introduced Talo and they showed all those different creatures. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I was taken back in awe at that. I did not expect it. So I just love the world building in this movie. I think that was one of my favorite
Yeah.
parts of it.
I mean, Talo is so big. Like, I was rewatching the movie the other day, and they're talking about it, and they're like, yeah, we have cities like bigger, like Talo is bigger than your world. And it's like, I feel like that's not been talked about enough.
No,
Just, it's like,
no.
okay, so we have a whole nother like
Yes,
universe here. It's
yes,
barely tapped into with Shang-Chi. Like, it's only
yes,
at the like last third of the movie that we
yes,
even get in, and then
yes.
like it doesn't even end there. It ends
Yep,
back in San Francisco. So
yep.
there's so much untapped to go. I would love to see in the future when we go back to Jialing and her and the Ten Rings. I would love to see those worlds intersect again, because Jialing has been there now, and so who knows where we could go with that. I would just love to see where they take it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Like I'm still thinking, I'm like, is Tao Lo really part of Earth, or is it like something that's like where is it in the dimension of
Yeah,
space? Because if it's
right.
part of Earth, it doesn't really seem like it could be part of Earth. Like, is it like a portal to another world? I don't know. And I did have a thought of maybe, and I think this is the perfect gateway into Eternals. Is a lot of people are theorize that the Ten Rings are actually connected to the Eternals because there's 10
Mhm.
rings, 10 Eternals.
Mm.
The rings were, and this I saw this theory on TikTok. I believe it's at just the nobodies. There's 10 rings, there's 10 Eternals. The rings have a gold cosmic energy. I believe the
True.
rings are also cosmic power. In the Eternals, they have gold cosmic powers. It ties, it's cosmic MCU. So I don't know. If
Yeah.
Shang-Chi connects to Eternals, I think that would be like a really great storyline to follow on Marvel's part. I don't know. I had like
Hmm.
this weird theory that I know some people are talking about like maybe the Deviants were connected to I don't remember what it's called, but you know, like that beast that's inside Tallow, like
Yeah,
that. Some people were talking about me, and my theory was like, what if the Eternals helped form Tallow? Because if Tallow is located
right.
on Earth and these Eternals have been on Earth, I feel like they might have known. I don't know.
I
You know?
know. How would they not? I feel like that was one of Druig's secret projects that the rest of them don't know about. Like he was like, okay, you guys just so you don't have to like no conflict, just like go to this mystical realm. It's gonna be super fun.
Yeah, I think it because they said that Tallow, it's been a while since I've seen the movie, but they said Tallow was formed by a bunch of people from another world who came to
Mm-hmm.
Earth. And I was like, I'm not saying much, but what if
Mm.
those people could be some of, and not even our Eternals, but it could be tied to the
Right.
Celestials, and the Deviants could be like one of the, not the Deviants, but that monster that's trapped in Tallow could be, a
Yeah.
failed creation of the Celestials, and they just
Mm-hmm.
decided to put it there. I don't know,
Yeah.
which leads me into Eternals because the way that Eternals opened up MCU, we've never seen that before. It is a huge
Nope.
scale. So
Mm-hmm.
getting from away from Shang-Chi, or kind of moving on from Shang-Chi, let's talk about Eternals, which I would consider the most divisive movie ever of the MCU so
Definitely.
far.
Maybe one of
Uh,
the most divisive movies,
and
period.
yes, and also the movie that actually connected the two of us, which
Mm-hmm.
pretty amazing. Yeah, let's start with that. So I think with Eternals, I'd like to keep it like, why don't you just start with like your thoughts on it, your initial thoughts, your overall thoughts, everything.
Okay, so one of my craziest favorite Eternals memories is I see every Marvel movie at the very first showing, so 6 p.m. on the
Mm-hmm.
Thursday before it premieres.
Mm-hmm.
That's always my show time. I remember seeing it then. My theater
Yeah,
was pretty full, which I was excited about. And I was by myself too, which was really
right,
fun. It was just no one else was with me.
right.
And I just remember sitting in the theater and thinking, that was pretty good. Yeah, I think I liked it. It was a
Mm-hmm.
little long. And that was like, that was that. And then I went home that night and then Friday and got on social media and just started like taking in all the input. And it was crazy. I remember being on my phone talking to two different people at the same time, like DMing two different people at the same time, one person who despised it and one person who was obsessed with it. And I was like, I do not know what to think about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But oh gosh, I could rant about this for hours. I think Eternal's strength lies in its characters, and you cannot get that having seen the movie one time. You
Yes,
have to have seen it multiple
yes,
times. So what happened
yes,
to me is I went back and then I went back. And then every time I went back, I got more and more attached till I
yes.
got to the point where I am today, where it consumes my every waking moment because it's just so good. And I think that I don't know what the box office like comparisons are, like with Black Widow and stuff, because I know Black Widow was more during like a lot of more theaters were closed with Black Widow, but I just remember talking to so many people who just did not see it. Like so many people didn't go see Eternals. I
They
don't
were,
know if
yeah.
I don't know if that was just because it's like you didn't know who the characters were and it wasn't really a priority to you, or you didn't feel comfortable with it, but so many people did not see it, and so many people saw it one time, let that one time affect their entire opinion, and then never thought about it again. And if I have if you take anything away from this podcast, take away the idea that you need to watch Eternals again. And it's coming out on Wednesday. So it begs to be watched again. It is that kind of movie. So, and
Yes.
that's what made me fall in love with it. So
No,
that is my story.
I 100% agree. It's so funny because I have another mutual on TikTok. Skylar, I think I'm pretty sure you
Mhm.
follow each other. Skylar,
Yeah,
right?
I know
Yeah.
her. Yeah.
So Skylar had a similar story too, where she watched Eternals the first time and she was like, "Oh, it was okay," and then she watches it again, and then she's like, "I fell in love with this movie the second time," and like I've seen her talk
Hmm.
about it, and I was like, I think for people who weren't necessarily hyped for the movie, there are so many different experiences people had. There was the people who watched it, despised it, did not think of it again. There's people who are medium about it, thought it was okay, thought it was great. And then there's people who watched it and were curious about it and then went and watched it another time. And then there's, yeah, I'd say those are the sort of three groups. And then there's the people who are kind of like very excited from it from the very start. And then, you know, and I wouldn't say like I was excited for it when it was announced. I really like started getting to the world of Eternals when we saw that little like Disney Plus Day, but more specifically towards the very beginning of 2021, when we got that little they dropped like a sizzle reel and they introduced a little bit of like each of the movies. I saw Eternals and then the official trailer came out and I was like, holy fuck, like this is in Marvel. And I don't know, something about that first trailer really captivated me. And so I was super excited after that first trailer. Remember the first trailer came out, I made an edit of that first trailer. So like I was just automatically captivated by the movie. And then after that, for me, it was just like researching the Eternals movie, you know, reading some of the comics, understanding the world. But I do agree it's a movie you have to see more than once if you are really like interested in seeing if your opinion changes, because Eternals is not a movie you can sit down and watch once and then think nothing. Like it's just not a movie you can digest in one watching, because it's a lot to take in the first time. And then the second time when you go back and you rewatch it, you tend to enjoy it more because you come comfortable with the characters, you can notice the tiny details. And I think that's like the biggest takeaway with Eternals is you have to see it more than once because you probably will enjoy it more on your second viewing.
Yep, completely agreed. Or third or fifth. I think I saw it. Oh God, I don't even know if I want to admit this over a recorded audio.
5 times? You're not the only one I know.
I think I saw it
6 times.
Like 10.
10. Yeah. Crazy.
Like a lot. My cousin and I could not get enough and we just kept going back and back and back and back. It was like really scary. Like, and like to the point where it was like no one in the theaters and it's just us sitting in the middle of the movie theater quoting the whole movie through and just cracking up at the parts that like no one would laugh at unless you've seen it 10 times and then you're like, this is funny to me because I love this character so much. And that's the movie. So I hope that it coming out on Disney Plus means that people will be able to give it more of that sort of attention and be able to see it more. Like personally, my budget was busted. I spent so much money at the movies. Seeing it and like hopefully like now it's free. So just subscribe to Disney Plus if you're not already there, and then you're good. You can see it as many times as you want and hopefully get that experience.
Yeah, I think we need to sit down and do a whole episode of Eternals and talking about it in the MCU fandom because it's too short to cram it into one.
It's too much.
Into one because Eternals is a lot, and honestly, we can sit down and talk all day about not even just the movie itself, but the different perspectives people had. Because I watched the movie the first time. I listened to some of the reviews afterward from some of like the really large creators, and I agreed with the things they said like the first time. And then I watched it a second time, and I was like, no, I don't think so. Like the thing with Eternals is you can't I like it goes back to the thing like you can't watch the movie once and base your thoughts on that because you have to go watch it again, see some of the smaller details. And it goes back to this conversation I was having with someone. Eternals is not like a Marvel movie you can watch for fun until you've seen it enough times to where you can. Like, it's not like Thor Ragnarok where you can sit down and be like, today I'm going to watch Thor Ragnarok. It's going to be a pastime movie, nothing else. No, like, you're watching Eternals, you have to, like, be active. Like, your brain, like, has to, like, you have to be paying attention. And I know like a lot of people, you know, they want their movies to be fun. So I completely do respect it. But I do think that if you are still unsure about Eternals, especially for the people who are unsure, is you need to give it a second viewing to really let it sink in. But hey, if your type of movies are the jam where, you know, you love a Marvel movie, you can just turn on, watch it for fun, think nothing of it, then I would say like Eternals is not the movie for you. And I would say I also respect that for a lot of people because I think it does take like a certain amount of dedication to be able to see, you know, dedicate that much to a movie. And it's not really for everyone. And I think that's another point that's like really important to talk about, how Eternals is so decisive because it's not a movie created for everyone, but also at the same time, some of the critiques that people have about the movie is so dumb if you just go and like give it a second chance. It's like a very like fine line you're walking on, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, the thing that gets me, because it's like, okay, if you didn't like it, I respect your opinion. That's fine. I understand. Obviously, like, I didn't love it at first. So I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from. What makes me mad is when people are calling it the worst MCU film and like trashing it as like not as like their least favorite, but just as the worst, and saying it's like a bad movie. Because just coming back to this theme of overall phase 4 and overall Marvel in general, the direction that we are going, I don't know how many times I have to say this, direction that we're going is not one direction. It's not like Marvel is trying to do this kind of story now. Marvel is trying to do many kinds of stories now. That's the whole point. They're catering to like a huge variety of audiences now because they've become so mainstream that they're no longer like punch action movies for white men. That's not the target audience anymore. The target audience is so much bigger, and so they are creating these movies with so much variety in the type of movie that they are. I mean, that's phase 4. Every movie is so different. It's like it pained me to try and rank them, because it's like, how can you compare No Way Home to Eternals? That's like comparing John Wick and La La Land. Like, it's like just so insanely different. And just because something is different does not mean that it is not good. It's just something that you didn't personally enjoy. So, I could rant forever, but Eternals is good in the way that it is. Like, it is a specific kind of movie, and it is supposed to be a specific kind of movie. It is not trying to be a Thor Ragnarok and it's missing the mark. That's not where it's going. That wasn't the intention. It's Chloe Zhao. Like, I don't know how to explain this to people, that it's like it's not supposed to be a Black Widow. It's not supposed to be Iron Man. It's not supposed to be Infinity War. Spider-Man. Yeah, it's on purpose completely different. That was a conscious decision, and you have to respect that.
Yes, no, you hit so many points, and honestly, I think we need to sit down and do like an episode about Eternals, because the more that you're talking, I'm like realizing so many other things I just want to get into. But I think the main thing I'm gonna say is Eternals is a different movie, and I want to know, and there are some people, and my personal belief is that the reason why people did not like Eternals, especially if you're a casual MCU fan, is because it's not that much connected to the MCU. Like, yes, you know, it set the origin of the MCU. Okay, the Celestials like created all life. But like, what more? Nothing. It did not talk about how one of the Eternals could have influenced an Avengers event, perhaps. I don't know, Fastos, I'm looking at you. You know, maybe he could have been helped in Wakanda. Maybe he could have been the one to introduce vibranium to Howard Stark. Like those small moments. I feel like if Marvel were to be smart in their way and give us sort of that prequel actually show into Eternals and talk about, hey, like, look, like the Eternals have been there this whole time. I think the more that the Eternals connect to the MCU, the more that MCU fans will like it. But I also will say I have heard of some people talking about how their friends who have never seen the MCU before go and watch, or like very, very casual fans of the MCU, go and watch Eternals and fell in love with it because there's no context of the MCU involved. But if you are an MCU fan and you are walking into Eternals expecting an MCU movie like you will, I assure you, you will be slightly disappointed because it is not your MCU movie. There's not, like, yes, like, it's just not an MCU movie. I don't know another way to put it. You cannot expect anything like Marvel-esque. Like, yes, it had the giant third act, you know, with like that big third act. Like, that was probably the most MCU could get. Yes, it did name drop the Avengers, you know, and but just the aesthetics of the film, it's just not. And the thing with Eternals is the reason what it makes it so different from the MCU is because it is a the format that it's on, it's a combination of at least 3 different MCU movies you've seen. It tried doing a bit Captain America Civil War. It tried doing it was basically a combination of like the plot of Captain America Civil War, Avengers 2012, and I'd say even to some extent Avengers Infinity War with like the whole Celestial plot that was going on,
Yeah.
all in one movie. And it's an origin story. Like it's crazy the type of scale they were trying to achieve with it. So that is why you need more than one viewing to appreciate it, because of its massive scale. And we can talk about the Eternals and the Celestials and how do I think the Celestials connect to whatever we will be seeing next in the MCU, whether that be the multiverse or anything. I think we can do a whole separate episode on that because I know both of us will have a lot of thoughts. But what are what's your sort of final thoughts on Eternals and its impact on Phase 4 and just audience and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I know that a lot of people would have loved for it to have more connection, like little connections like that to the MCU, like the vibranium thing and stuff like that. I agree that that would have been good, just not in this movie. I think that this movie had to lay the ground base, can't talk today, and shake things up a little bit and like make people mad about how different it was. In order for the story to continue. And then I think any Eternals continuation, so whether it's a prequel or a continuation of the story in somebody else's story where we're seeing Eros and Dina and Makari and Druig in space or whatever that would look like, I think that then can tie more tightly into the main MCU, because we've already established what Eternals is. But if we had all of that like fan service and references and all of the little connections, because of the type of the movie that it was and the type of the story that it was and how little it really does connect, even though it really connects so much, it would have made the movie, like, they wouldn't have felt like it was their movie. It would have felt like it was cheapening that movie. So
yes, the scale.
Yes, I think it's perfect as it is, and then we can move forward. And again, I think when we move forward with that, I don't know where we're going to see that, if it's Moon Knight, if it's wherever Dane comes in again.
Love and Thunder.
Yeah, Love and Thunder. I hope. I would literally die if it was in Love and Thunder, because that's soon. Yeah.
Imagine I don't know. I thought that one of them might pop up in Multiverse of Madness, but I just think I don't know. I was thinking Multiverse of Madness because you're introducing all these different universes and Eternals, and maybe you won't see an Eternal. Maybe we'll see a reference to some Celestial. I don't know.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be continuing the Eternal story necessarily. We just want to see like some connection to the elements that were introduced in that movie, like the Celestials or whatever.
And when you think about it's even more crazy with Eternals for me, it's just to think about, because Eternals takes place before No Way Home and before a lot of some of the other Phase 4 projects we've seen. There's a literal Celestial in the middle of the ocean, and Hawkeye is on top of the Rockefeller Christmas tree. Like when you have to think about the fact that those two exist in the same world, as someone who passionately loves Eternals, my brain literally hurts. I'm like, that's why I need that connection to the MCU. Like, you can't just have Hawkeye be on the Christmas tree and then there's literally a Celestial dead in the ocean, across the world. And I'm just like, what? Like, no, that is not it. So,
and it's starting to be like near the end of the year, I think all 3 of those projects, Eternals, No Way Home, and Hawkeye, were all in the same general time. Because
I think Eternals was a little earlier.
It was slightly earlier, but then at the end of the movie, we see it's like winter in London. So I don't know. It looked like January to me, but I've never been to London in January, so I would not know. But Dane's wearing a scarf. They're all wearing coats. So it is cold. We know that. And so it just, hopefully it's hinting at some semblance of crossover soon, because it's like, how are you guys going to ignore a giant white thing in the middle of the ocean? Like, that is literally they can't just cover that up. It's not even in the realm of the American government either. So they can't just pull an American government thing and just be like, this didn't happen. Like, this is not even America's problem. This is like the world's problem. So
yeah, and
I don't know.
I think one of the other things about Eternals was it was not, I don't think there was like a single reference setting in New York either. It's kind of like Shang-Chi, where
Yeah.
the only times we saw the United States was what? I want to say, I don't even know if Fastos was living in the United States. I don't think, I know Ajax was in like South
Yeah,
Dakota,
Ajax
the
was
most
in
random of
one
all
of the
places.
Dakotas. I know.
But I don't even remember where Fastos was. I want to say, but like it was like a global movie. It was a global film. The cast was global, but man, there's just so much we can talk about Eternals. But I think, like you were talking about, it was in the realm of Spider-Man No Way Home. We're sort of getting into that era. Let's move on to Spider-Man No Way Home.
Okay.
Which having Eternals and No Way Home back to back was an exhilarating experience as someone who loved who we both loved both movies, seeing the grand scale of Eternals and then seeing that what was Spider-Man No Way Home. And I just want to preface this by saying that we will be discussing No Way Home plot points. This will be a spoiler for No Way Home. So if you've still not seen the movie yet, this is the time for you to tune out. But I'm hoping everyone who is listening has seen the movie. So yes, but we can discuss No Way Home spoilers. So yeah, let's start with No Way Home. Why don't you just like anything? Why don't you give it a shot or not shot? Why don't you give me your thoughts?
Okay, so it was interesting to have back to back with Eternals because they are both very grand scale in completely different ways.
Yes.
Eternals, though it is all over the place and very big, it is so about Earth. And it is about time, but it's about like fixed time. It's not about the multiverse.
Yes.
No Way Home is exploring multiverse, everything multiverse.
Yes.
And I think that is such a Spider-Man concept. Like, it's so fun to have that, like that movie, like the first movie where we're really, really diving into the multiverse, be a Spider-Man movie. I was very nervous about this because we've had Into the Spider-Verse. I think Into the Spider-Verse is one of the best movies ever created. And so I was super nervous about it because I was like, how are they going to top this? Spider-Verse did it already. And it was completely different. And they did it in such a good way to where we went into the multiverse, but we still know nothing about it.
No, we don't.
And it sets up Multiverse of Madness so well in that we want to see more of these concepts that were kind of introduced in No Way Home with no context. Yeah. So Multiverse of Madness, I think we're going to get more nitty gritty into that, like exploration of all of that. But anyway, No Way Home, just comfort, fan service in the best way, like just had so much heart. I think it had the most heart out of any of the movies this year. Like if any movie you could say like, this is like coming from here, it's that movie.
Yeah.
I'm still emotional about it. Like I don't have a lot of rational thoughts. I'm still just kind of like I just love it.
I think my thing with No Way Home is that I never like grew up on the Spider-Man movies. I watched the Spider-Man movies this year, the first time, the live action ones, because I was like, I started hearing, the multiverse and stuff and all these different villains coming back, and I'd go through my Twitter feed and like people talking about these different villains, and I'd be like, I have no idea what you guys are talking about. Like I have no idea. So I watched the Spider-Man movies for the first time to understand, and I'm glad I did. It really made the movie enjoyable for me, but I just didn't have. And we can talk about, what happens in the movie. So I did not have the nostalgic attachment going into this of like seeing these characters brought back on screen in 20 years. But let me tell you, when those two walked out, I was cheering. I was like, yeah, there's no way that this is real. And I think the biggest thing for me is I'm still like, the more I see the clips of them from No Way Home and the more I see the scenes of the three Spider-Men together, the harder it's for me to accept that it happened, when I feel like it should be the opposite. Like the more you see, you'd be like, oh yeah, like this. No, the harder it's accepting for me to happen is the more I see it, because I think for me, it's like, I can't believe Marvel pulled it off. And they pulled it off in like the most perfect way. Like, I literally had no criticisms about the way that they showed the three Spider-Man. Like, it was perfect, down to the tiniest references, you know, them doing like the pointing meme, or, you know, like Toby talking about, you know, oh, my web shooter's like it comes from inside, and them being like, what? Like, all those like tiny references were just placed so well. And seeing the three of them together, I'm still reeling over it. I'm like, there's no way that they actually did this and managed to pull it off in the perfection that it was done. And yes, it was a movie of fan service, and yes, maybe like the plot was, you know, a little like murky, but who cares? It was fan service, and it was done to the T. And I think in the larger scale of exploring the multiverse, I honestly wish that they introduced the multiverse with No Way Home rather than the mess that the Loki show was. Because I personally did not enjoy the Loki show too much. So it was just like the three of them together, and the movie exploring really what it means to be Spider-Man. I think for me, it became the best live action Spider-Man movie I've seen, because it just explored Spider-Man and explored the meaning of Spider-Man, and kind of doing like the 360 with Tom, where now he's like, you know, he's like back to ground zero. I think was like a really great creative choice and direction from John Watts, and just the overall plot. And I'm glad we didn't get the Spider-Man versus Craven movie, because I feel like personally, I don't know, that could have been a little boring. So I'm glad that they ended up going the direction that they wanted with the movie.
Yeah. No, I love what you were saying about how I agree with everything you said. And I love how you're saying the element of like them bringing in Andrew and Toby was so well done. And I agree, like they could not have done it better. I loved how it was like everything about it was like a reference to something, but it didn't feel like you're outside of an inside joke.
Yes.
If you know what I mean. Like, obviously we both watched it knowing the context of the old movies, but I feel like if you hadn't seen the old movies, you still would have loved that like banter that they had. They also made like did a good job of like evenly poking fun at like how like not amazing some of the other movies were. Like Andrew's Spider-Man making fun of the like rhino suit that he had to fight at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, or them just kind of like poking fun at how weird Toby's Peter looks. They're like, who? That's just a regular guy. Like, I think they did that, and it was all in good fun. It wasn't like a diss, obviously.
No.
But it just kind of, they didn't like take it so seriously, which I am in the same place as you. I watched all those movies this year. I didn't grow up with them. And so we're in the same boat. I enjoyed them, but I think maybe just because I don't have any nostalgic attachment to them, I don't have any like reverence for them, especially the Toby movies. Like, I'm just like, these are like, to me, watching this, it's like, this might be controversial, but I'm just like, this is not a good movie. Like, this is just not well done. I can see why people like it, and I can see why some elements of it might be good, but like his acting is not good, in my opinion. Like, it's corny, but that's what's so lovable about it. So I think they did a good job of like holding that and recognizing it, and not just like putting this like insane reverence on the past movies, like where it's like, this is the best thing, and like we have to like revere this character. It's not like a Star Wars situation where it's like the first movies are the movies, and like we have to like respect. It wasn't like that. It was more fun and playful, and just in the best way. Like, all the references they made, like the, you know, I'm something of a scientist myself, like they know that's a meme, and that's why they put it in. Like, I don't know. Everything about it was so fun. And I think I saw almost all the movies this year, like at least 4 times in the theaters. Not all the movies this year, all the Marvel movies this year. And this one I've only seen 3 times, and I don't really want to go again, because I'm trying to like hold that that memory of the first time in my head because it was so special. So it's like I almost don't want to see it because I can't, like you said, like I can barely believe it's real still.
Yes.
And I don't want to mess it up by watching it too many times because it was so special the first time.
Yes. I think you brought up a lot of great points, and I wanted to touch on it's weird. It's crazy that we both watched the movies today, like for the first time last year. I was thinking this year, and I'm like, we're already in 2022. Oh, last year. I think watching the movies was a good decision, but I also wanted to kind of add on to what you were saying, like even if you've not seen the past movies, because I went and watched No Way Home with my sister. My poor sister had never seen the past movies before, so I did try explaining a little bit of things to her. I was like, like there's been other two Spider-Man, like there's a few of the villains, and like here's some of the events that happened in those two, and I was sitting there and she would ask me like, what does this mean? I'd be like, I can't tell you. Like,
she had to watch the movie.
But regardless of that, she walked out and she was like, that is one of the best Marvel movies I've ever seen. And she has no connect, like she had no passion for Spider-Man beforehand. She really didn't care for Spider-Man. Like, I just mean that in like she's the most casual Marvel fan. She'll just watch the project if it's really interesting to her. But like she won't really watch like the movie if it's, not too much. She hasn't seen all the movies. So before y'all come from my sister, she doesn't really care for Marvel. It's just she watches it because I watch it. So, but yeah, she loved No Way Home, and she was like, you know what? She was like, I was crying when Aunt May died. I was crying like towards the end when all three of them were together. And I think that really speaks to how well No Way Home was done and how it's truly a movie for all fans. And even though it is mostly a love letter to Spider-Man fans, it is at the end of the day, at its core, it is a really wonderful overall movie for Marvel fans, just because of how it brings everything together and you can still enjoy it and love it for what it is. And I just think like that was like No Way Home's biggest strength, were its characters and the character dynamics especially, and just the Spider-Man and like what it means to be Spider-Man, how that was explored. I think that was like the best part of No Way Home. And kind of talking about No Way Home, and why don't we kind of like what do you think is your thoughts on the future? Because we know there's a college trilogy coming, but what do you hope to see in the college trilogy?
I don't know. I've heard people saying that like the spell isn't permanent. This is the thing about the movie, that this may be like my one criticism. Nothing really makes sense. The Doctor Strange's spell does not make any sense.
Yes, I do agree.
I almost feel like they're gonna have to like backpedal on that a little bit because it's such a big deal. And then like for that to be such a big deal, and like that's how they ended the movie, and then that will be the basis of how they move on, is the fact that no one knows and Peter Parker's existence is like wiped from the planet. I think they're gonna have to do a lot of like backpedaling and like fixing up that concept. And I think hopefully they'll do it in Multiverse of Madness, because I think we're definitely going to touch on this in the events of the movie. I don't know. So it depends on the way that they decide to spin it. Is the spell going to be reversed? Like, will people remember him again? Or is it just, are we just going to keep going with it? I feel like that they're going to have to establish more bounds of the spell and explain it better and make it make more sense in order for them to build a foundation for a new trilogy.
Yes, no, I definitely 100% agree. And it kind of goes back to my original point of the plot was a little murky, because there are a lot of things in the plot to me that did not also make sense. Like, especially the spell, like I'm glad they integrated magic in the multiverse, but to me that spell just didn't really make sense. And, I was just confused by it. And I think that was like one of the more weaknesses from the movie, was the spell itself, like the plot of it was just if especially like for someone who isn't too attached for the character of Spider-Man, it was just something I noticed. Like, I love the movie and I love what it did give us, but I was also watching the movie with a little bit of like, what exactly is going on, because I was confused by the plot. And I know people will be like, why are you being critical of Spider-Man? No, you're allowed to critique a movie if you see it. I've critiqued Eternals for some of its things. I don't mind if other people critique it, but I will say that was like one of the more confusing parts. But honestly, I think for me, I just overlooked that with what we got, and I'm just so happy about what we did get. But I
Yeah.
do think that I also think this is like a thing with a lot of the Phase 4 movies, maybe except for Black Widow, is that Marvel needs to start tying up and connecting these like loose ends that at least because with
Yes.
Eternals, it's the Celestials, and also like with the Eternals, I also feel like one of its like thing was like the Celestials, and also one of the things with the Eternals was how it connects to the rest of the MCU. I think like that was kind of like a weakness of the film, if you may say. It was missing that with Shang-Chi, you've opened up Tao Lo, now what? You know, with Spider-Man No Way Home, okay, like the spell happened, but like now what? So I think, and
Hmm.
obviously like I
All
feel
the
like in the
shows
past
too
with these
opened up so
origins,
much.
sorry,
Oh, sorry. I was just saying all the shows too opened up so
yes,
much content like that.
yes. And I do think that like Marvel's eventually going to tie it up, but I just hope that they do it in a way that's cohesive and well done because when you like look at the other phases, the origin stories, they're not usually left up with like loose threads. Like the Iron Man
No.
movie was okay, Tony Stark becomes Iron Man, that's it, good, done. I think with Captain America was okay, he's frozen in the ice, but you know, it like makes sense. Like you don't really have to ask the question of like what then you kind of already knew what may be happening. And with Thor, even like the origin story for Thor, it was like, okay, well, okay, Thor came to Earth, but it didn't really like end up leading you with the question of what then because it was pretty concentrated, I guess. But that's my thing, like I would say my thing with especially Eternals and Spider-Man No Way Home is like the plot was so grand in its scale. And I'm just curious about how they're gonna explore that in the future because I think that could have been like one of the more confusing parts is okay, but the characters were so good. The characters are so
Yeah.
good. I can often like forgive, not even forgive, like I just don't really care about those details until we actually they try to explain it more and fix it. And then based on like how they try to connect it, I'll be like, okay, like maybe this is like, okay, that makes sense. Okay, doesn't, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And like someone and I were talking about this earlier this week, but phase 4 is massive. Like this is already so many more projects
Yeah.
than have been in any of the other phases.
Yeah.
So do we know what it ends with? Like, do we have like an established like point for phase 5? Like what is phase 5 and what's phase 4?
We
Or
have
is all this
no
stuff they're still
idea.
announcing? Okay.
We have no because they we still like now that the multiverse is open, it's like are all the projects we're gonna be seeing, and I hope that the one thing Marvel doesn't do is have all the projects we're seeing right now, unless it's already tied to a character that we've seen in the previous things, like be concentrated in this one universe, and especially on
Yeah.
Earth, because I feel like you can't have all this going on
Right.
Earth and I hope that what Marvel does is kind of like what they did with What If, you know, it's like have these like different stories about other universes, maybe bring that to live action and be like, hey, like, you know, like the origin for this certain hero is being set up in another universe, but eventually we'll
Right.
see them make their way to like the main timeline and somehow connect with, you know, some of the other
Hmm.
heroes. Like I think that's something that I hope like that's a structure they follow, and I feel like that's one of the easiest things they can do so that they can justify having so many projects. They can just be like, oh yeah, like you know, they take place in different universes, and it makes sense. And then like they'll take place in different universes, and eventually these all these other heroes will find their way to the main one. Because I keep on thinking about like Moon Knight, and I keep on thinking about Blade, and I'm like, Earth already has so much with like Tao Lo and
Hmm.
like the Black Widows and you know, like Falcon and the Winter Soldier and like Asgard is now also on Earth and Eternals. Like, how are you gonna be able to show that there's fucking vampires living in like the
Right.
underground of all of this? Like, so I do hope that one of the things we see is kind of sort of in the future with the movies or even the TV shows is having some of these like solo projects be set in another universe and then just being like, hey, yeah, they'll eventually make their way. But I just think like it's a bit of a cop out, but I think it'll be a cop out that's very much easy to explain and also just
Hmm.
simplified and easily to understand and wrap your head around. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't really thought about that. I can see
Yeah,
that being where they go.
yeah, I'm think I'm very curious to see how everything just connects though, and that's sort of my except for Black Widow, that's sort of my takeaway with like most of the movies we've seen this year. But
Yeah.
yeah, do you want to give your like ranking of the four movies?
Mm. Okay, well, to
It can be
me,
based off enjoyment. It can be based off enjoyment.
yeah,
It can be off of how well they're done, whatever you want.
that's what sucks to me because, like I said earlier, it's like all four of the movies are so wildly different. None of them, not there's four of them, and none of them fall into the same
Yep.
category. So it's so hard to compare them. And then also, I am of the opinion that they're all pretty equally good. Like, I don't think that there is one that is like shining star. This one is obviously better than the other ones. I think they're all like, in
Right.
terms of like good
Right.
movies, especially because I was trying to explain this to someone the other day. On my phase 4 ranking, all four of those movies, or not phase 4 ranking, on my like full MCU ranking, all four of the movies are in my top 10. Like, they're
Same.
just better
Same.
than other movies that
Yes.
Marvel has done in the past. So I think they're
Same.
just all really good. So if I had to rank them, it would be based on personal connection.
Yeah,
My
I think
ranking
that's
is yeah. My ranking is Black Widow is number 1, Eternals is number 2, Shang-Chi is Black Widow is number 1, Eternals is number 2, No Way Home is number 3, and Shang-Chi is number 4.
right. No, I
Yeah.
think that's a pretty. I think like obviously your ranking is valid. It's your ranking. It's your opinion. So I completely respect that. For me, I guess I'll give you mine. Basically, you just move. My ranking is you take Black Widow, put it
Yours
at
is
the
like
bottom.
opposite for mine, right? Yeah.
No, my ranking is you take Black Widow and you put it at the bottom, and then the rest of the three are the same order.
Oh, yeah.
So it's Eternals,
There you
No
go.
Way Home, Shang-Chi, and Black Widow. And I want to reiterate that my ranking is also like 80% personal, or not even like personal enjoyment. I would say like 70% actually personal enjoyment.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is just on like how well I thought the movie, but I'd say it's mostly personal enjoyment because, well, when you put Eternals over No Way Home, that they come for you. They come for you in
do. I have
droves, and
seen the
I'm like,
comment sections of your videos.
listen, I never said No Way Home was a bad movie. It's literally my number 5 overall in
Yeah.
Marvel. It's just that I enjoyed Eternals a lot more. Eternals gave me something I've been waiting for, gave me a South Asian superhero. I was never a huge fan of Spider-Man. Like, the movie was great. I just loved Eternals and enjoyed it a lot more. And you know, like if we're gonna talk about like how well, if we're gonna like base the conversation on how well the movie is made, I do think that some of the flaws, like I do think that if we're talking about like how well Eternals and No Way Home is made, is it's very hard to compare even on that scale because Eternals, again, it's an origin story. The scale of it is different. It's a different, like it's from a different section of the MCU, and the Spider-Man No Way Home, it's the ending to a trilogy. It's a multiversal movie. Like I don't even think I can compare them on the level of, oh, which movie do I think is like better made or whatever. Because they each have their different unique directors and the vision, and so
they're better made in completely different ways. Like it's not even
Yes. Like I feel like with the earlier movies, it was a lot easier to kind of compare them against each other because the stories,
similar.
The stories were similar, and like the overall structure it followed was similar. But like I can compare Black Widow versus, the Falcon and the Winter, or not Falcon, sorry, Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Like you want me to compare those movies? I can do that. They're both like spy sort of thriller type movies. I may probably make a comparison between Shang-Chi and like maybe one of the Thor movies. I don't know. Probably not too much. But I can't really compare Eternals. Maybe like the movie you can closest compare Eternals to is like The Guardians, because very similar to like style, origin, but still no.
But the energy is not
the energy is not the same though. Spider-Man No Way Home, I just don't think you can compare Spider-Man No Way Home because it's the first multiversal project, and none of the other projects have done that. So Spider-Man No Way Home is kind of in its own category. I would even argue Eternals is sort of in its own category. Like, it's so hard to compare the current projects we've got to what we've gotten in the past, unless it's based on personal enjoyment. I feel like that's the only way you can look at it, is I just enjoyed this movie more than others because I love some of these characters more than others. If that's it.
Yeah, totally. That's what it comes down to. And it's like, it's not something to fight over. Like I said earlier, the whole point of phase 4 is that Marvel is turning into a pick and mix in the best way. Like, people will enjoy this side of Marvel and other people will enjoy this side of Marvel. It's opening the floor now to more types of moviegoers and more types of fans. So the point is that different people will have different favorites because it's catering to a bigger audience.
Yes.
So
I do agree. And I feel like with the way that we've seen Phase 4 so far, I don't even think that if you like get into Marvel through one movie, I don't think you have to go back and rewatch all of the other ones to understand the point we've gotten up to. Like maybe, like maybe watch like Infinity War and Endgame, but like what now now that this has ended, now that like 2021 ended, if we're counting the shows as well, there's like what 35 projects in just the MCU, and technically 32. With Andrew and Toby being in the MCU, their movies are also MCU canon. You're gonna do a rewatch of the MCU, you better have a lot of free time on your hands.
I know.
That's not happening. You can't just you have to start like from the Toby movies and then go all the way down to like Spider-Man No Way Home. And I'm just like, if I do a rewatch, it's an MCU center, like it's just like only MCU rewatch. So
yeah, I know it's crazy. It's gonna be crazy. Like I have not even been a Marvel fan that long. Like I joined in 2018. Nice. So but the amount that has come out since mid 2018 when I became a fan is like insane. Like it's almost doubled since then. Like back when I joined, we hadn't even hit 20 yet. And now we're at 32, not including Andrew, Toby, Daredevil, like Punisher, all of that, if that's canon, So it's just massive. And I just like thinking about me when I joined the universe and was like, I remember going back and watching all the films in chronological order and just being like, wow, this is so many movies. This is going to be crazy. Like, I don't even, because now we have shows and that is a lot of content to get through.
Too much.
I don't envy someone who is getting in now and wanting, well, I do at the same time because I would give anything to like watch it all again for the first time, and it's so good and worth it, obviously, as we know, but it's a lot, man. It's gotten so big. It's really a whole world, and there is no other film franchise that has done anything like this before. It's really, really awesome and really cool. They're pioneers.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see the types of stories that Marvel will tell. I think it'll be really interesting to see maybe the new fans, and people have like this weird mentality that if you got into Marvel because of WandaVision, it's weird. Like I've seen people trying to gatekeep, and I'm like, are you like actually dumb? Because Marvel is a huge franchise. People had a lot of time on their hands during the pandemic. Like WandaVision was an era. Like everyone, like people were talking about it all the time. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone just decided to jump in and WandaVision was the first thing they watched. And wouldn't you want people to become new fans? Like Marvel helped so many of us. I would want people to join and it helped them. And yes, like it's always fun to like connect with fans who've been in it for like a really long time and like seeing the growth. Like you can have those conversations. But I love seeing new fans. Like one of my favorite things is like watching people watch Marvel for the first time and their reactions to it. I'm like, it's like one of those most wholesome things ever, and I love seeing new fans so much.
And they have great perspectives too. Yeah, like listening to them and hearing different opinions is super fun and interesting.
Exactly. I just don't understand when people try to like gatekeep Marvel.
I know.
Like
it's the biggest franchise in the world. You can't gatekeep it. It's not niche.
It was toxic before. Like I don't know. Like I was obviously when I got into Marvel, I was a very young kid. I did not really like care. I wasn't involved in like the fandom culture. To me, I was just like more watching the movies. But I know from like some people who are older than me, like they were like females, especially were like really big fans of Marvel, but they were always, like it was kind of like they were teased about it, like at the very beginning because it was like made for like men or something. I don't know, but I've seen a few like people talk about it, and I'm like, it's always been toxic. Now that it's just not, the stories aren't catered to white males anymore. I think it's great that we're getting new fans because it's catered to a more diverse group of audiences. Like, it's going back to what you said. So I'm really glad to see new fans. I'm really glad that these movies are bringing in new fans, possibly old fans. I know a lot of people watch Spider-Man No Way Home. So yeah, I guess we'll see where it goes. But I guess we can end it off by which movie are you most excited for in 2022? Although I think I do know your answer.
It's kind of a given. It's definitely Multiverse of Madness.
Very happy for you.
As I have to say, as the Wanda stan that I am.
Yeah, I think.
But Love and Thunder, I know, is your favorite, right?
Yes.
And that is my number 2 for sure.
Yeah. The only reason like Multiverse is not my number 1, and I know it is for a lot of people, and Love and Thunder is my number 1, and that's because I love the world of Asgard. Outside of like everything the Eternals have given us, I've always loved Thor. I love the world of Asgard. Valkyrie is my second favorite character. The Guardians are Nebula's my just overall favorite character in the MCU. So having the Guardians in there's just so many elements in that movie that have me excited. And it's like for you, you're excited for Multiverse of Madness because of Wanda. I'm excited for Love and Thunder because a lot of my favorite 3 out of my top 5 favorite characters in Marvel are in there. So
and hopefully the Eternals.
Right. That's why I'm like looking really forward to Love and Thunder. And I will say though, I talk a lot for Multiverse of Madness. Wanda is one of the things that has me most excited. Doctor Strange, I don't really care for his character. He's a fine character. I don't really care for him. But yeah, I think Wanda is the one I'm most excited to see in Multiverse of Madness for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, a friend and I actually did a podcast that was all about this recently, but she had so much, WandaVision was so much like setup. That's why I think I know it's not your favorite Phase 4 project, but I think that's one of the things that it did so well is it was simultaneously a strong continuation of past events and sometimes and closure on past events as well, and at the same time opening a crazy door to a whole new world. And we don't know where she's at. That's the thing that's so intriguing. We don't know if she's reformed and she's like now a good guy. We don't know if now she's totally gonna go freaky and dark in this movie. It ends on a super ominous note in WandaVision and very mysterious, and the trailer for Multiverse of Madness hasn't really given us a clue to which side where she's gonna fall in that. So just with her new power and where she is like emotionally and with her character development that she's had now, it's gonna be super fascinating.
I think I have like a really not love-hate relationship, more like a curious about, don't care with like the character Wanda. Like I think for me, WandaVision, the biggest standout was Wanda's character. I just think I have a lot of questions about her character. Is she a Nexus being? What is her origin? Because we found out that she had magic ever since she was young, but like, how? Like, I need those answers. And I think that was one of the best parts of WandaVision was learning more about Wanda's character in itself. And I had tweeted out the other day, I was like, like Wanda's kind of growing on me. Like, I think the more that I think about her and like the more that I just see of her in like Multiverse of Madness promo art, I'm like, I think she's like, I'm just more like, intrigued by her and excited by her. To where she's like kind of growing on me in that sense. So I'm excited to see the direction they take her character in. I just really, really, really hope she doesn't die, because in terms of female characters being introduced to Phase 4 and written well, Wanda was probably like the first female character we saw in Phase 4 that was actually like she was shown really well in terms of like, I mean, she was the
first one period too in Phase 4, but completely. I think she's one of the first, because it's like they got a restart with her and WandaVision. So it was one of the first moments. I mean, it was like, I don't want to missay this because I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that it is the first like female-led Marvel project, correct? There's no other like, Black Widow was the first. We have Captain Marvel.
Right. I'm not the biggest fan of Captain Marvel movies, so that movie
so we had Captain Marvel, but I'll say, I guess one of the first, or the first to get her own show at least, like really, really projects that were led by a female character. And it's almost like it reset like what we had on her to start with, because she had always been a side character. And I think that played to the strength of WandaVision, because it wasn't a Black Widow situation where she had always been a main character and then they had to like go back and fix the things they did. She'd always been a like side character, like minor. She was barely in Infinity War. Like she had a big moment in it, but she's not in it that much. So getting WandaVision was a good, like, it was almost a jumping off point for her start as a main character and a main female character.
Yeah. And I'm excited to see, you know, what they do. I hope that she goes honestly completely evil, because I'd love to see that in many ways. I don't know, I like female villains. Like,
they're the best. They're the best ones.
My favorite is Hela out of WandaVision. I loved Agatha. I know a lot of people were like, but we don't need an Agatha show, but I loved Agatha. I loved the attitude she has. So I'm actually excited for her spinoff show. I liked Ava Starr, who was in Ant-Man and the Wasp. Like, so, but
they're just so complex and interesting and cool. Hela's always been my favorite too. Before Agatha, I was like Hela all the way, and now like, they kind of share for me, but still. Like
Hela is my favorite like villain from Marvel, period. And I know we only get her for one movie, and I know she's not like complex or anything, but like she's just cool.
She's just cool.
So cool. I just love her like I don't give a fuck attitude. So but I think this was a really packed episode. We discussed you know, the 4 movies. We discussed Wanda towards the end, and thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Really great chatting with you. I think we should make an Eternals episode where we talk specifically about Eternals, because I know for a fact that we both have a lot to say, and you know, this podcast was inspired off of Eternals, so we gotta make this a central focus. Never stop talking. But thank you so much for joining, Lauren. I hope that you had a great time on here. And thank you everyone for listening to the episode of Eternally Obsessed. If you want to check out Lauren, I will leave all of her links in the description as always. Again, she is Little Miss Scarlet Witch on TikTok. So if you're a Wanda stan, go check her out. You will love her. Thank you guys for taking out your time. And in the next episode, we will be discussing the phase 4 of the shows on Disney Plus, and I will have another special guest joining me for that. Thank you so much for taking out the time to listen to your episode. I hope you guys had a good year. And Lauren, any last words?
No, this was super fun. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for volunteering to host this episode. And
of course,
let me know your guys' phase 4 ranking of the movies, your thoughts, and anything we discussed. And I will see you in the next episode, everyone.